Just one. Give me one. I can come back after. Shadow cabinet. Oh yes, that's a very important question. I don't know whether they have a shadow cabinet even in the United States. I'm not quite sure. I think that we must always remember that no, we don't have a shadow cabinet. I don't see that kind of thing happening because of the large number of parties. I think the British model can work well when you have 2 parties or 3 parties or 4 or 5 parties. We have a very large number of parties, and that is what makes coalition politics so very complicated. Now you will ask, why do we have so many parties? I think that our country is an enormously larger and more diverse country than any of the European countries. In terms of size, the United States is large, but it doesn't have anything like the kind of diversity of language, religion, community, classes that are a part of Indian society. I think that we have more than 100 parties which are officially recognized by the Election Commission as parties. Now that I think is a bit too many, but I don't see realistically our political system settling down to a system of to a 2-party system or a 3-party system or a 4 or 5-party system. So we have to live with coalition and learn how to operate coalitions of the government as well as coalitions of the opposition without the whole system being thrown out of gear. I think we still do it to some extent in committees through which the government functions. But something needs to be done to put order back into Parliament. I think Parliament has got back into its act, I think in some sense, over the Lokpal Bill. I have nothing against the Lokpal Bill, but I don't see what right a group of persons who gather together at Jantar Mantar or at the Ramlila grounds have, what right they have to present themselves as civil society members. At least for members of Parliament, I know that I have voted for my member of Parliament. And he knows that if he doesn't perform, he runs the risk of not being re-elected. But these people come and go. I'm not saying that there is anything wrong with that. But there is something very different between an institution in which we know how the leaders have come up, through what process they have come up. We can hold them to account, if not now, at the time of the next elections. You know, Mr. Somnath Chatterjee, who was the Speaker of the Lok Sabha, was so exasperated in his memoirs, Keeping the Faith, he has let himself go at Parliament. And I don't know whether he said that in Parliament, the Speaker said, I'm afraid you are working overtime in order to destroy democracy in India. And things of that kind. And at the end, in his last meeting, when he was addressing for the last time the outgoing members of the Lok Sabha, he ended his speech by saying, now you are going back to your constituencies and I hope that all of you lose. And this created a furor. And I asked Somnath Babu, why did you withdraw this statement? And he said, you shouldn't ask me that question as a sociologist. I didn't realize what the implications of my statement were. He said, after all, I'm a Brahmin. And a Brahmin's curse is taken very seriously in this country, even by the politicians. I may be a communist, and I may not believe in the efficacy of a Brahmin's curse, but you will be surprised how many members of Parliament believe. And so I had to withdraw.
I set myself a target of 20 minutes for discussion. This is true, but I will take the liberty of asking you the last question. Very correctly, I entirely agree with you on that point. You have laid extreme importance to building institutions, and that's the message. And I suppose many of us who have crossed the age of 60 are increasingly getting oriented about some of them. The building blocks of a successful democracy, parliament, judiciary, somehow or other, I think, is not exactly the sync with each other. And we are finding encroachment on the rightful spheres by other institutions the last down thing on how do you see that future?
Thank you very much, Professor Bhattacharya. I think first of all, I mean, one must see that the great institutions of democracy are themselves not fully in sync with each other. I think that there is a lot of mistrust of Parliament by the judiciary, and there is a lot of mistrust of the judiciary by Parliament. I think that, you know, so the social movements must go on. They must be. Civil disobedience, I think, is a legitimate right in a democracy. But as far as the civil disobedience is concerned, Dr. Ambedkar had again warned in Parliament, in the Constituent Assembly at the last meeting when the Constitution had been adopted, when he gave his final closing speech. He said you know, we must now turn to the institutions that we have and give up the mood of agitation, because when we were being ruled by the British, we had no other recourse. It was justified to take recourse to agitation, strikes and battles. Now that we are going to rule ourselves, we should abandon, he used a wonderful phrase, he said we should abandon the grammar of anarchy. And I don't think that we have done that. And I don't really know how we will accommodate social. I think social movements are very important. Civil disobedience is, I think, a fundamental right in a democracy. But what is the shape that civil disobedience takes when we compare the greatest exemplar of civil disobedience in human history with what goes in the name of civil? Mahatma Gandhi always said that as citizens we have to all submit our conduct to scrutiny, but the civil disobedient must be prepared to submit his own conduct to stricter scrutiny than other citizens. Now this is not true. So civil disobedience can succeed only when we are prepared, when the civil disobedient is prepared to submit his conduct to strict scrutiny. That has really not taken root. But we still have institutions that function badly. They are at loggerheads with each other. There is also something to be, not only are the institutions of democracy at loggerheads with social movements, but the institutions of democracy are in many respects at loggerheads with each other, and we should worry about that. But again, you know, I mean, India is not the only country where this happens. I mean, look at what is happening in the United States. Look at what is happening in the United States. Congress is threatening not to pass the bills, and it came very close to a point where the salaries of the government officials could not be paid at the very last moment. Congress is determined to defeat Mr. Obama's health bills, and so, you know, I think we should not be complacent. I think we should be vigilant, but we should not be despondent. I don't think that we are all that badly off in comparison. We are very badly off in comparison with the hopes with which we started. But we have still survived, and I am inclined to agree with my friend Ram Guha, who says that India is a 50-50 democracy. Sometimes I feel that India is only a 60-40 or 65-35 democracy, but still it is something. And I think that we should not discount what we have achieved in the last 60 years.
Come up.